Jennings. I am a board member at the Esperanza Peace and Justice Center. Have been a board member since 2005. Today is so special. Thank you for coming to our trans kids back to school event from Tus Niños También. This is the fourth annual event that we've had, which shows how much the Esperanza Center has really tried to walk the walk and been a good ally and a supporter of these trans organizations here in San Antonio. And so it really is important to step up and support organizations like the Esperanza. So I'm going to leave it to Natalie now to, again, pass out envelopes if any of you would like to make a donation. Thank you.
And then now we're going to get the program started. I'm going to invite Lauryn Farris, our moderator, a queer corazon, my friend, to the stage.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Natalie was actually an intern when Queer Corazones got its start, and we were both there at the meeting, the very first meeting of Queer Corazones. This is amazing. The Esperanza Center is a place I very much love. It is the very first place on earth that I truly felt like I could be there and just be me and be safe. So if you can donate to Esperanza, I strongly encourage it. But let me start out by saying that over the next couple of weeks, a lot of kids are going to be headed back to school, and it's a difficult time to start school or to be in school. Preschool, any part of school is difficult. When you're trans, it's sometimes almost impossible. We work with a lot of school districts, and we see a lot of things. I'd like to tell you something that's very exciting to us. We're encouraging more and more school districts to be active, to be fully inclusive, to live into full inclusion, to change policies if they can, but more than fighting for policies, we're fighting for support, affirmation, and love for every child. That's what we believe is important, and that's what I hope you hear tonight. I want to begin by saying that a lot of organizations really work hard to put this on. Two of them are the Transgender Education Network of Texas, which I'm a part of. And the organization that helped make TENT, we call it Transgender Education Network of Texas, TENT, and the organization that helped make TENT what it is today, both financially and emotional support and a lot of other things, the ACLU of Texas. And in 2017, I was in charge for TENT for the Trans Lobby Day in Austin. And I'd taken over kind of late, and so I called someone put me in touch with a gentleman at the ACLU, and I said, help, I really need help. And he said, Lauryn, whatever you need, we're gonna get through this, and we'll make it an amazing event. And it was an amazing event. And he worked every moment of the 2017 and 2019, but with me personally in 2017 in making that a very successful legislative session for fighting against the things that might hurt us. Without further ado, I'd like to invite up here to speak from the ACLU of Texas, Brad Pritchett, and my friend.
I'm going to do is talk a little bit about it's a Know Your Rights presentation. We're going to make sure you understand, both students and parents, the rights of students in schools, because there's a misconception sometimes that your civil liberties and your free speech ends when you walk into a public school, and that is not the case. So, we can go to the next slide. So just a couple of things we wanted to be really clear about here when students are transitioning at school. Your gender expression is protected. It is protected by the Constitution and by Title IX. And recently, Gavin Grimm just won his case. I don't know if you guys saw the news, right? That was an extremely case. And it just further reinforces the fact that your gender expression and your gender identity are protected under the Constitution and of Title IX. The second thing is, you have a right to be yourself, and that includes the right to transition. So schools, there are a lot of obstacles that you have to deal with, including restroom access, locker room access, name, pronouns, how elected officials are going to classify you in records, but you have we don't have specifically clear guidelines yet on that, but most schools are working to accommodate students when they transition, and if they aren't, you can contact us and we will help to hopefully write the course a little bit. Next slide, please. So this is a really good resource, Gender Spectrum. So it's genderspectrum.org. And they have some really good resources on it, including a gender transition plan. So if you're a student who's planning to transition while at school, we would basically recommend you talk to your counselor and possibly take a copy of this particular document. It's a plan that the two of you can work through together. And that way the administration is being involved early on, and you're going to be able to get more support, hopefully, if you're coming in really prepared to have the discussion. Next slide. I forgot to say it. My pronouns are he, him, his. And those are my pronouns. They're not my preferred pronouns. No one's pronouns are preferred. They're just your pronouns. So that's one of the things that I think schools sometimes have a hard time with, is using proper pronouns. So when schools are refusing to acknowledge a student's gender identity, by not updating their school records, by not updating their name on attendance sheets or student IDs or in the yearbook, or associating the name with pronouns that actually reflect who they are. And we know that that can be really impactful in a negative way on students, and can affect academic performance as well as can be emotionally upsetting and can be psychologically damaging. So we want to ensure that folks understand that pronouns are an important part of this. Your pronouns are your pronouns, they are not preferred. Your name is your name, it is how you should be addressed. So discrimination against trans students in that way does violate the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution in Title IX. So if it's happening, you need to know it's happening. And usually if you're, depending on the school district that you're in, you may be able to have an easier time of getting folks to accept that. But we are Texas, so the odds are good that you're going to run into folks who are not too happy about being accommodating to trans or LGBT students in general. Next slide, please. So bathroom placard signs, everybody's favorite piece of artwork. So schools have a really important role in playing in making sure that students have the same access to the same opportunities, right? And that means a safe environment for learning. It also means full participation in the activities of the school. So when we have students who are transitioning and they're being told they have to use separate facilities, that's sending a message that they're unfit to be on the same level as all the other students, right? So most of the experts agree that trans kids who are discriminated against in that way are going to suffer academically, socially, and are at a higher risk of depression. So this is a public health situation as well, right? It's not just about someone's pronouns or the name that they want to be called by. This is a public health situation, and it's an educational situation. So that's why it's really important for trans kids to have access to the bathroom that is in accordance with their gender identity. We all know what bathroom we need to use, so we should just respect that. Next slide, please. So freedom of speech, you have that everywhere you go, including on public school campuses. The only time at school that you don't have free speech, or when your free speech might be limited, is if your free speech is disruptive to course material or learning material. And what I mean by that is if Alex and I are having a conversation at lunch and we're talking about my gender identity, that's not disruptive. I'm allowed to do that. If we're sitting in a classroom learning math and I jump up in the back of the room and scream, "I'm gay," disruptive. So one is disruptive, one is not, right? And your speech isn't restricted. Disruptive speech isn't speech that somebody doesn't like. It's disruptive, and there are clear definitions of what constitutes disruptive. And just talking about gender identity or LGBTQ issues is not specifically disruptive. So if somebody doesn't like your speech, that doesn't mean it's disruptive, it just means they don't like it. And I'm sure you'll dislike somebody else's speech at some point as well. The other thing I do want to add is you can write as a student or talk about LGBTQ issues and content if it's relevant to an assignment. So if you're asked to do a history paper on a hero of yours and you choose Marsha P. Johnson or Sylvia Rivera, you're allowed to do that. And the teacher can't say you can't pick those people. It's not disruptive content. Next slide, please. So your freedom of expression includes how you dress. Does everyone know what I mean when I say gender stereotype clothing that's gender stereotype? Can somebody give me an example? Like gendered clothing? A dress, right. So, if your school's dress code says that you have to dress a specific way or uniforms, that's a different story. But just because you're wearing something that might be considered controversial doesn't mean it's not allowed. As long as it's something that any person can actually wear at school. So your right to free expression extends to your gender clothing as well. So if anyone in your school can wear a skirt and you identify as a boy and you want to wear a skirt, you're allowed to do that. If anyone in your school can wear a tuxedo and you identify as a girl and you want to wear a tuxedo, you can do that. It's as long as the clothing that you're wearing is allowed by anyone in the school, it's allowed to be worn by everyone in the school. You'll get pushback on it, absolutely, in certain school districts, but that's what we're there for. The thing that school districts can do, and the courts have said school districts can do, is they can use dress codes to instill discipline. And typically what that's going to mean is they might have a dress code that includes things like your hair length, or might specifically say, a skirt has to be at a certain inches away from the knee or the ankle. But beyond that, they can't tell you specifically you cannot wear gendered clothing. So next slide. The other thing that you have access to as a student is you have a right to privacy. So you have a right to be out at school. So if you choose to be out, you have that right to do that at school. You can discuss your life and who you are at school. The other thing that if you choose not to be out, or even if you're out at school, the school doesn't have a right to out you to anyone. So if you are a student and your parents don't know that you're LGBTQ, but your counselor does, your counselor should not call your parents and have that discussion with them. That's a right to privacy that we all have, including students when they're in school. Okay. So we always encourage folks to, especially LGBTQ folks, but students in general, should know what the school's bullying and anti-harassment policies are. Some have really, really good policies, some have non-existent policies, but we do want people to understand how bullying is dealt with in your school and what the recourse you have as a student is if you encounter it. So the way you can do that is Google, right? So if we can go 2 slides, please. You can go to Google, and you can Google something like San Antonio ISD, board policy, non-discrimination policy, LGBTQ policy. Next slide. What that'll bring you is to a school district's website, and then you can navigate the website to find out what the board policy is. On the next slide, you'll kind of get an idea of what happens in San Antonio for its policy. The next slide, please. Thank you. So some school districts have policies that are extended to gender identity, expression, and sexual orientation. Some have policies that may be less inclusive. Maybe they haven't been updated in a long time. But most schools will have a policy in place for how to deal with bullying. And if your school administration or your ISD doesn't have a non-discrimination policy on the books, talk to us as well. Maybe we can help change that. Next slide, please. So this is an online resource that the ACLU built in conjunction with Kent and Equality Texas. This is txtranskids.org. And this is an online hub that's designed to basically be a one-stop shop for questions people may have about kids transitioning in schools and what their rights may be. So we really are promoting that. We have cards downstairs if you need them. If you want to distribute them to folks who may need them, by all means, take as many as you want. But it's a really important resource, and up until 2 years ago, probably, there was nothing really that was a clearinghouse for this type of information. So we really encourage folks to look into it. It'll tell you things about how to create a GSA at your school, dress code information that we just kind of covered, access to facilities like locker rooms and restrooms, and bullying and harassment policies. So next. So this is the big one. If you think your rights have already been violated at school, Number one, we want you to keep calm about it, and we want you to document everything. So we need you to stay as calm as possible, and remember that throughout that process you have rights as a student because your rights are protected by the Constitution and Title IX. We don't want you to disobey or resist the faculty or the staff if they're telling you to do something. We want to start documenting everything immediately. We want to know who you were talking to, who was talking to you, who was in specific meetings, what you were told to do. If you can get things in writing, that's always useful. And then make a formal complaint, and then if you need more force behind it, you can contact the ACLU. And our website is aclutx.org. Next slide. Or you can contact me. This is my email up on the screen right now. And then also our social channels are on there, and you can always tweet at us or tag us on Instagram if you're trying to get information to us. So that's all I have. It's really brief. But if you need more information, again, you can email me. You can go to aclutx.org. You can go to txtranskids.org. And I'll be sticking around for the rest of the night. And if you have other questions, just come talk to me. Thank you.
You are all currently sitting in San Antonio City Council District 1. And it's a pretty amazing district. And it includes most of downtown, several other parts. And one of the people that supports our community the most is our city councilman. Tonight, we have 100 backpacks that will be available downstairs right afterward. And those were provided by our city council office. And at this time, I'd like to invite up here and introduce you to my city council person, but more, I think my friend and someone who's helped me and our community a great deal, Roberto Trevino.
Thank you, Lauryn. I'm really happy to be here. And by the way, we not only donated the 100 backpacks, but I also brought an additional 30 coupons for free pizza at Main Street Pizza. So up to 30 coupons are going to be given away with the backpacks. I hope you kids get a chance to get those coupons. I want to thank the Esperanza Center for always being that place. It's that place that, as Lauryn said, is welcoming, is a safe place. You guys do great work, and I'm always proud of it, and feel great coming here too. I want to just mention that this is an important time, and I can remember when I was a kid. Just about the time that we're going to go back to school. It was kind of scary, and you kind of think, oh man, you really want to go to school? And the last thing you want to worry about is some of the supplies, some of the little things that you got to go through just before you go to school. So that's why it's so amazing that we have this event, because it is a scary time for all of us, but for our kids especially, and we should comfort all our kids. And I'm here to tell you that you have a friend in District 1, you have a friend on the City Council. I'm proud of the fact that San Antonio NISD is doing what they're doing, and we hope to continue to push other school districts to have inclusive policies as well. And we'll be a voice for you as well. You may not live in District 1, and so I encourage you to call your elected official in the district that you do live in. If you do not get a response, call me. 210-207-7279. If you'll get a response from me, I can assure you that we're very, very proud of our community. We're proud of the diversity, and we're proud of the inclusive nature of what San Antonio is and will always be. Thank you.
So every year, we always have someone representing school districts, representing the schools, speak. This year, I would like to welcome up here someone that I know personally, someone that she's been to the presentations we do, our tent trainings. She has also invited us to speak in her class. She teaches at Trinity University. She attended Sam Houston State University and Texas Tech Universities. She has practiced school psychology in Illinois, New Mexico, and Texas. She currently works as a supervisor in Northside ISD's psychology services department. And aside from her passion for her profession, she is also an ardent soccer fan and referee and a mother of 2 toddlers, one of which we are happy to have here with us this evening. And she enjoys staying constantly busy. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Laura Renken from NISD.
Lauryn had emailed me and asked for a short bio, and now I wish I would have known that no one else had one because I feel a little bit pretentious, so I'm sorry about that. So she asked me specifically to talk to you guys today about comorbidity. And so what that means is when we have one thing that we classify as a disorder, and we have other disorders that happen concurrently with it. And so a lot of our trans students that come into our districts, if they've been seen by professionals, may have diagnoses of gender dysphoria. That diagnosis in and of itself is very controversial. It used to be until 2013 was gender identity disorder. It was changed to hopefully take some of the stigma out of it. It removed the word disorder from the term. There's still controversy about it, whether it should be a diagnosable condition at all, but we'll kind of put that to the side. The problem with talking about gender dysphoria and other conditions that might be co-occurring, such as anxiety, depression, other psychological disorders, is that there's not a lot of research on this topic. The reason is because, first of all, to get really large data sets that we like to see, those data sets that have thousands and thousands of participants in it, those are usually funded by national organizations, the CDC, things of that nature. And it's been very, very difficult to get questions about gender identity even included on some of those surveys. For example, one of our best or most often used things when we're looking at these types of risk factors and what kind of mental health services do certain populations need is the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance Survey. It goes out to high school students, 9th through 12th grade, every 2 years. And that has questions on pretty much everything, on bullying, on diet, on smoking, drinking, illegal drug use, sexual habits, pretty much everything under the sun. It's a tremendously large data set, and it's used for lots of different things. But there is no question on there, as of today, for gender identity, asking a student what his or her gender identity is. There are questions about sexual orientation. Even those have been fought by certain states saying, you know, you're sexualizing our children. How dare you ask about these things? These are children, you know, that kind of resistance. And I don't intend to get political, but even the steps we have made in including gender identity in some of these large data sets are being rolled back under the current administration. There's adult surveys that do ask about gender identity, and we're finding that in these newest version of the surveys, these questions have been deleted. And the rationale for that was that, well, just not enough people said that they were trans, so we just dropped it. And, you know, we know that that's a flimsy excuse at best. However, we do know that students who identify as trans in the school do have a higher rate of depression, of anxiety, those more internalizing mood disorders. We know that from studies that have been conducted recently, but more so of studies that have been conducted overseas, mainly in Europe, where they've been much more open to this kind of research. When it comes to treatment, because there's not a lot of data, there's not a lot of evidence-based practices regarding how do we treat this population. And so what we have to do is we have to rely on, well, this worked over here, so let me try it here. You know, and kind of a try, and hopefully you can find something that works. And especially in the schools, psychologists don't like that approach. We like evidence, we like data, we like numbers. It's like, show us something that has been proven to work, because especially say you work in a high school setting, I only have 4 years with a student. You know, I don't have time to try and fail and try and fail. It's not going to work. But like we said, when you're thinking about going out and voting and researching candidates, that can be something that's on your radar as well. It's not always the big ticket items like the bathroom bills and things like that. We also need to be thinking smaller. But in terms of what you can do for your students now that are going into schools this year, all over San Antonio, I should have probably started with the disclaimer that I am in no way acting as a Northside spokesperson today. The views expressed are my own and not those of Northside ISD. I think that's the statement I was supposed to read. Something along those lines, you get the picture. However, what we're trying to do, at least in Northside, and that's where I can speak to, is we're trying to get out the word that kind of knowledge is the first step, right? We would hope for universal acceptance. Northside is a huge district. We have 180 campuses with more being added every year. In my own department, we have about 100 school psychologists that are spread throughout the district. And so we're starting in our department, we're doing the safe zone training. We're calling in Lauryn and other experts in this area to teach us what we need to know. Because a lot of people, if you say, oh, well, you know, are you accepting of everyone? Oh yeah, sure. You know, we teach everyone, we don't care, black, green, yellow, whatever, we take, and that's not enough. You know, it's not enough to just say, yes, I'm accepting of everybody, because there's a difference between tolerance and acceptance. You know, you can say, I tolerate this, but there are some people that you get the gist, what's behind them. Yes, I'll tolerate you. It's not the same as I accept you for who you are, and you are welcome in our school. And so we really try to get that message out there that it's not just about being tolerant. You know, you have to take that extra step. So some of the things that we recommend for our school psychologists are like the GSA. You know, we're not faculty, but if that club needs a sponsor, go do it. You know, if the GSA is having a bake sale, go buy a brownie. You know you want one anyway. You know, buy an extra one, take them home. Support the students. We had a student that came to our school, and I worked at one of the high schools in our district, and all of a sudden one day I got a teacher running in, and they said, Laura, there's a girl trying to register, and it's not a girl, it's a boy. What do we do? I'm like, and in my mind, I'm like, is the registrar not here? Get them the registration pack. You know, what's the problem here? And they said, well, no, what do we do? I mean, would he, her, and I'm like, you ask. You know, this might be your first experience with a person that identifies as transgender, and that's okay. If you don't know, ask. But I said, she told you she was a girl, her name is Andrea or whatever, you know, but so that's what you say. You know, that's what you write on the paperwork. And there are certain circumstances where that's not always, we can't act in the way we would like to. For example, our special ed records, we have to have a legal name, you know, and if the name hasn't been legally changed, then whatever name we have on file has to go on that report. But we give our people the tools to say, you can have the legal name at the top of the report, but you can put a little disclaimer in the first sentence that, you know, so-and-so identifies as female and her preferred name is this, and that will be the name that's used throughout this report. You know, and the things with the bathrooms, maybe the school isn't as supportive as we would like as, you know, using the bathroom that that student's choosing. But we can make it clear to that student and their family that, hey guys, you know, we know this hasn't happened yet, but we're fighting for you. We talked to the principal, we wrote a letter to the superintendent, we're working on it for you. And I had a student that came to me and I told them again, you know, hey, I'm sorry, I know this is a hassle for you, you're having to go to the nurse's office or use this other restroom. And she told me, you know what, miss, it's okay, because I know even though you haven't done it, that you're trying, and that means a lot. You know, so if we can't change the policy right now, we can at least make it clear that we're on your side and that we support you. So for your students, there is a small population that comes into the schools and they do have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, and parents will write letters saying, well, I want them evaluated for special education. I want to see if they can get some counseling in the schools. I want to see what there is that can be done for these students. Because from a recent survey, we know these kids need support. 85% of them reported being verbally harassed at school because of their gender identity. 50% report being physically harassed, just bumped or shoved into a locker or something of that nature, and 25% reported actually being physically assaulted. So harmed, punched, kicked, thrown down to the floor, been the victim of someone with a weapon. 25% is a huge number. It doesn't matter how many kids the whole population is, that is a huge number. And more so on the educational side of it, over half of students that identified as transgender said that they missed at least 1 week of school the previous year because they were scared to go for whatever reason. And so we know that that impacts them. It impacts them not only emotionally, but also physically. And so going to school and being afraid, being unsupported is not a situation that we want to put any of our students in at any time. If you have a student that is suffering with depression or anxiety, in addition to identifying as transgender, there are some supports for you. Special education is an option. If you have a significant mood disorder or emotional need, there's a process that differs for every district. But something that we're also doing in Northside ISD, and you would have to contact your district or your school to know if this is applicable in your district, but we are also offering what we call psych consult services. So typically services with a school psychologist are reserved for students in special ed that need significant help, have been through the evaluation process, it's very lengthy. But on these psych consults, we can have a parent sign consent and say, I would like you to be a safe place for my student. I would like them to be able to come and see you once a week if they want to, or just on an as-needed basis so that we can be one extra person to support that student. And so check with your district, check with your individual school, and see if that might be an option for you or your student. But that is all I have. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much, Dr. Renken. And she is with a district that her voice and the things she said and how supportive she is of our community is reflective of much of the administration of Northside ISD. And when the bathroom bill was in Austin, there was one superintendent who was willing to stand up and say, I oppose this, and that was the superintendent of Northside ISD. And so their policies are not inclusive, but they live into it as much more than many do. Dr. Renken can be a great resource for you in the district if you need assistance, or if you're having issues. Not every district in San Antonio is quite as inclusive, is quite as welcoming. Some have schools that do well, and you'll hear more about those this evening. But I encourage you, if you have specific questions about how can I help my child in school, Dr. Renken will be here, and she will help answer some of those questions, as will the parents and others. At this time, he hates it when I say this, but I want to introduce you to my boss. I want to introduce you to someone who, so the Transgender Education Network of Texas has been around a long time, but we were never truly recognized statewide as the organization that represented transgender community and organizations across the state, and by ACLU and others, but now, thankfully, we do have that recognition. And one of the people, probably the person that has the most to do with that, is the person I'd like to introduce you to now. He is the Executive Director of the Transgender Education Network of Texas, Emmett Schelling.
So, like Lauryn said, my name is Emmett Schelling. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I lead TENT, which is Transgender Education Network of Texas. We're a statewide, trans-led, trans-focused organization here in the great state of Texas, and We deal a lot with ledge, which you heard a little bit about. I don't want to really dive into that too much and get too political, but I don't think it's a secret. The way that our legislative body here in Texas is towards trans identified individuals and students, unfortunately. So a lot of our work centers around that during the odd number years, and the rest of our work is advocacy done through an educational lens. We work really hard to do this work through a racial justice lens with an emphasis on the many intersections that make up one individual. Because contrary to popular belief, being trans is not the only facet of transgender people's whole sum of who they are as people. So I was asked to talk a little bit about what it's like to be a trans man, in a large sense, sometimes we're an invisible population. When the bathroom bill came around, one of the things that I think shocked the legislators was when trans men started to visit their offices. And I'm Asian, so I don't personally have a beard, but we brought in, a lot of trans men from all over the state, and when they walked in, they were like, you're pushing this bathroom bill, but essentially what you're gonna do is you're gonna push me in the bathroom with your wife. So how, what does that mean? What's the implication? And it kind of did shine a light on, I think the insidious motivation behind it, right? So trans masculine people, trans men, because they are largely sort of like invisible in a lot of ways, because externally we don't face, I think, the same level of violence that trans women do. I think it's very important for people to understand that. That's why we really center that. Why we push that, like, we need to stand with trans women, especially Black trans women, especially Latinx trans women, trans women of color. Because they are at a disproportionate rate for violence externally. However, when we're talking about trans men and trans masculine people, we are at a much higher rate of violence internally. In terms of suicide, our rates are just, when people see the numbers, it's very sobering, it's very shocking. But a lot of the issues come from, when trans men transition, a lot of times we don't see role models. So for me personally, the first representation in the media that I saw of somebody that whose story echoed mine, and I finally was like, I'm not just imagining this, and I'm not alone, was Boys Don't Cry. So, if anybody has seen that movie, it's a very jolting movie as a child to see that, to realize that your story connects someplace, and then to see where that story ends. Because that story was also based on a real life situation that happened. So when we talk about trans men, unfortunately we also need to talk about the role that we play in sometimes bringing some facets of toxic masculinity, of misogyny, into trying to fit into this world of how we're viewing it, how we feel what makes somebody a man, right? And knowing who we are and knowing sometimes fitting in, it's not popular to say this, but fitting in is to some extent a degree of safety, right? And so for me, seeing trans masculine people sort of mimic these really unhealthy attitudes and behavior is really heartbreaking. And when I think about, trans kids that are coming out, young trans masculine folks coming out, I really feel that responsibility, that weight, to hopefully be a better example, to hopefully be able for trans kids, masculine, feminine, to look at and say, I can be successful, I can be okay, I can be safe. Because a lot of times, unfortunately, when we talk about our community, we're talking about like these doom and gloom things. And for a child who's already dealing with XYZ because of who they are and they cannot help it, and then having a lack of positive representation, that is still unapologetically, like I'm a binary trans man, but like still, hopefully we're doing better. My hope is always that the work that I do will trickle down, will help other trans kids to see that like the world is not all these statistics, it's not all people that are against you, and it's changing in a good way, slowly. It's changing in a bad way sometimes. Anybody that turns on the news knows that. But we're here and we're fighting, and you know, I have so much respect for parents who listen to their kids. They believe their kids because it's a hard thing. When I came out to my parents, I lost my parents essentially. So that piece of having, you know, your family, the people that are supposed to love you no matter what, they're supposed to always be there for you, abandon you, and essentially tell you you are not worthy, you are not loved, and you do not belong. And something is wrong with you. You know, that the weight of when that happens, I think is a trauma that it's very hard to wrap your head around, which I think really ups the responsibility of the work that we do. So I want to say thank you to everybody who came out, that's Esperanza Center, ACLU, and for the parents that came with your kids, thank you. I often kind of look at parents who are supporting their kids and like fighting for them so hard. And I think to myself, you know, in 20 years, things will be different. In 30 years, things will be different. Maybe they won't be all the way different before I like leave the earth, but I'm already seeing change. And a lot of it is thanks to the support, to the love, and the continued like quest to educate ourselves, to learn more, and to learn how we can be better supportive for kids that are trans and do face many more risks than their cisgender counterparts. Thank you.
I think it's really important that we have some place for youth to go, for youth to find a safe place. Several years ago, another parent and some other individuals, parent and that parent's child, decided that we needed a place that was a safe place for LGBTQ youth in San Antonio. And that organization does amazing work. That organization is called Fiesta Youth. And one of the things about this program is we have kids come up and speak with their parents, sometimes as part of the panel. And this person spoke the year they got out of high school, and they were very young. And now, I'm not gonna say they're much older, but they are older, still young, but older. I'd like to introduce you to Leo from Fiesta Youth.
My name's Leo. I'm 21 years old. I am a student at UTSA majoring in mathematics and astrophysics. But along as being passionate in the science and mathematics, I'm also very passionate in organizing. It was, as Lauryn mentioned, 4 years ago, let's just say that I came out when I was 16 years old, and it was the first time that I was very, very scared. I was very, very vulnerable to my parents. And although they have always been very, very accepting of all of their children, regardless of the life that we wanted to live, they always emphasized that if there was anything that we needed to discuss, they would be the ones to listen and tell us that they're gonna love us no matter what. It took me a really long time to realize that I was trans, and when I came out, she said, you know what, I love you regardless. I'm gonna call a doctor tomorrow and we're gonna figure it out. And it was the day after that we figured it out. I met a therapist, I met a new endocrinologist, I saw many specialists, and we got my process started. I think like a week later. And I was just about to be a senior in high school. You know, I was very involved. I went to Jefferson High School. I was in the band, I was in the track and field. I was also in an all-girls society called the Martha Jefferson Randolph Society. And every single program that I was in knew who I was and knew how passionate that I was, that they automatically accepted me into their program, and they didn't really budge that I was transitioning. They were always just there to accept me and keep me going, and they made my process go so much easier. It was, after I graduated high school, it was when I came across the Esperanza Peace and Justice Center, and I was one of the members that helped put together the Queer Corazones, and we put together this panel, Tus Niños También, and because we wanted to make sure that other kids who were just like me that were transitioning in high school, we needed some kind of administration to just help us and let them know that, you know what, there's kids just like us in high school. Some may not be out, some are, but a lot of the administration didn't know what they were going to do to help us. So that's why we put this organization together. Along with that, I'm also very involved with Texas Rising and URGE, and we focus a lot on LGBTQ equality, reproductive justice, immigration reform, criminal justice reform, and many other things. But like Lauryn mentioned, Fiesta Youth was the first program that brought me into what it is to be queer and how to be vulnerable and how to live the authentic life that I wanted to live.
Kids are always the most important and special part. There's one kid who I'm not going to get to introduce tonight. She'll be starting middle school this year. 4 years ago, she had just come out and she was really struggling in a Northside ISD school, but she's doing really well. And the schools are doing really well with her. So we have always invited her back for an update on how she's doing. This year, little Jazz doesn't want to be here. Jazz doesn't want to be here because Jazz just wants to be a kid. Just a kid. Not a trans kid, just a kid. And so we completely understand that. But I want to give Jazz a round of applause.